Hello and welcome once again to TalkPAD, where we talk positively about dyslexia. And as ever, we have an amazing guest. And also, as ever, I am joined by the dynamic duo, the amazing pair that is Charlotte and Jamie McAnch.
Hiya.
Hello. It's lovely to be back, Guy. It's lovely to see you, mate.
Well, you know, it's been too long. It's only a month. So, as you can see, folks, we have our wonderful guest, Matt Hancock, who needs no introduction. But this is TalkPAD, where everybody gets an introduction, only the once. So I have prepared a few things here. So brace yourself, people, because let me tell you about our guest. Matt Hancock is a British politician and member of Parliament and has been since 2010. He has served as a minister in government in various roles on a number of occasions. We all know Matt best, or think we do, from seeing him regularly across the media as Health Secretary during the COVID pandemic. Matt grew up in Cheshire and studied maths-related subjects at A-level, earning a place first at Oxford University to study philosophy, politics and economics, and then a place at Cambridge University to further his study in economics. It was at Oxford University that Matt's dyslexia was first identified. Matt has worked as an economist at the Bank of England and subsequently as Chief of Staff to the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Matt's ministerial roles are too many to mention at this moment, but they include the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, Energy, the Cabinet Office, Culture, Media and Sport, as well as Health. He's been the Paymaster General. He has been the United Kingdom Anti-Corruption Champion. And in 2019, Matt also announced his intention to stand in the Conservative Party leadership election, but withdrew. But that is not all. Matt is a man of many parts and capabilities and trained as a jockey in 2012 and won a horse race in his constituency town of Newmarket, where my brother lives. Matt also supports Newcastle United. Matt is an avid cricketer and plays for the Lords and Commons cricket team. He once played the most northerly game of cricket on record, succumbing to frostbite en route to the pole, but retains all his fingers. So the opportunity to be a classical pianist still exists. And Matt is dyslexic. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matt Hancock. Wonderful to see you, Matt.
Matt, I don't know whether to
here.
Wow, I mean, what a CV!
It's great to be here. It's exhausting listening to all that, Guy.
Well, that's only some of it. It's only some of it, isn't it?
Phenomenal. I'm genuinely blown back. And as an adventurer, that's the one bit I heard. All the rest of it I ignored and just went, oh my God, he's been to the North Pole. So yeah, I bow to you a bit more now for that. Well, it is great to have you. And I'm sure Guy has some amazing questions up his sleeve as to, I'm sure we will as we go along. But come on, Guy. Wow.
Well,
what can I say?
I've got to say, the thing, you may not know this, Matt, but I do coaching for adults with dyslexia, mostly through the Access to Work route. And so the people that I meet are often struggling, having a hard time. So that's the background to this podcast, to talk to people who have achieved or are achieving success at work despite the challenges. So it looks, doesn't it, from your amazing intro, that you have kind of breezed through very successfully. And I guess that's not quite always the case. And I heard another podcast with you talking to Darren Clark recently, where you said that when you mentioned to the Cabinet Office, another member mentioned that he was dyslexic as well. So what I'm curious to know is what are the challenges? Because there must be them, and how do you manage it all?
Yeah, well, it's great to be on, Guy, and I'm sorry about that bell. I'm in Parliament, and that's the bell for the end of the parliamentary day. It might go off again, but I'm sure we'll get through it. It wasn't easy, and at school, I just thought that I wasn't very good with languages and wasn't very good with words, and now here I am in Parliament, in a profession which is all about words and all about language and trying to persuade people of things, essentially. And there were, especially before I was identified as dyslexic, I had some some serious problems. But then it stayed with me. So when I got to Oxford, having done maths-based subjects at school, and then got into Oxford on an interview, because back then you didn't have to do an exam, you could have an interview. So I got through on the gift of the gab. And then they took me to one side and said, your oral communication's great, but you can't write. And I was very, very lucky because, it's an amazing university, and they essentially re-taught me how to read and write. But the problems stayed with me. So, I remember in my 20s, I was writing an election leaflet for my then boss, who was he was the MP for Guildford. And in it, he wrote out his, the leaflets that come through your door as election time. He wrote out, "I want to unite the community." And I thought that was a choice phrase. So I pulled it out and put it in big letters across this leaflet. But unfortunately, I wrote, "I want to untie the community." This mistake was only spotted when the 40,000 leaflets were delivered to every single household in Guildford. So it was a bit of a, that was one example of the problems if your eye can't notice the translation, or in this case, the transposition of two letters. So, spell check came along. Without a spell check, I think my career would have been pretty short. But that doesn't do everything, because, as in that example, both of those are actually words. It's just that they have completely different meanings. And so I've had to just work through that and work around that all the way through my career.
So I've got a question for you.
No, wait. Like, I've got to get this one in, right? And I'm really dressed up for this. So here's the thing. Is it that you put in more time and more energy than those people, your colleagues who don't have dyslexia? Have you got a team of people who are reading stuff for you or to you? There must be masses of stuff, information to
material. Well, I'm a pretty slow reader, and in government, I was very lucky. It suited me because there's the civil service team, and they are brilliant. And I said, if you put a document in my box for looking at overnight, you've got to put a one-pager on top of it. And when I became a Secretary of State in the cabinet and had junior ministers who I could delegate to, I'd then read the one-pager to decide whether to delegate something, or if it was sensitive or big enough that I had to do the whole thing, read the whole document myself. So it was actually when I was explaining that to my new private secretary, when I was made culture secretary, he said, I'm dyslexic too. You've got to start talking about this and tell people, because through that you can show people that even if you're dyslexic, you can still succeed and get to the top table in your chosen profession. So it was actually it was the process of getting the help that I needed that led me to being persuaded to go public on it. But yes, it's reading is slow, but fortunately I've got a decent mathematical brain and I can talk. So those I just majored on those skills. And then I have more support for the long reading.
Well, actually, Guy, great question, which was actually almost identical to the question I was going to ask, which is, you have a lot of reading to do in Parliament, and now I know how you get around that, which is brilliant, and it's a great adaptation tool. But what I really picked up on there was you've got to talk about dyslexia, because so many people live with it on a daily basis. They don't know, they don't realize, or like me, I was told that I was basically the thick kid. My English teacher literally said to me, I had no concept of the English language. And my maths teacher told me the only numbers I'd ever make up were numbers in the dole queue. Fortunately, I've never really had a problem with either. Yeah, I know, right? I know. I mean, this is very
outrageous.
Very
outrageous.
But isn't it, how important is it now to have people like yourself in positions where they can make a difference? And do you think that living with a neurodiverse condition actually makes you a better MP and a stronger MP because you have better empathy for real conditions?
Well, I think that what you want in a group of people, whether it's the body of MPs or the cabinet or running a business or whatever, you want people who think differently, and people who are neurodiverse think differently, come at things with different attitude, and you get better decisions, I think, when you have different people with different backgrounds. So it isn't necessarily that it's a positive, although dyslexic people tend to be more creative, have more lateral thinking. Maybe it's because of the way our minds are wired differently. Maybe it's because we've had to mitigate and find our way around problems all our lives. And so you want lots of people who think differently. You do want some straight line thinkers. I've got nothing against non-dyslexics. Some of my best friends aren't dyslexic, but you want the creativity from a group of people whose minds work and through their experience come at things from a different point of view. That's my attitude to it. I'll tell you a story about that. When I came out as dyslexic in government, I got a text from a number I didn't recognise saying thank you for saying you're dyslexic, and I found being dyslexic was incredibly helpful in government because it helped me focus on the things that mattered. And this text was from Michael Heseltine, another famous dyslexic, and he says that because he's dyslexic, it meant that he had to focus on the big questions rather than get dragged into the detail. But the funny part of the story is then I wanted to save his number in my phone, right? Because I hadn't, I knew him a bit, but I didn't have his number. The Michael was fine, but I couldn't spell his surname. I mean, Heseltine, it's just an H and then a whole collection of letters. I've absolutely no idea what order they go in. And so I ended up having to Google Michael Heseltine in order to find out how his surname was spelled, put him in my phone whilst he was congratulating me over coming out for my dyslexia.
I feel your pain, right? Because I tell you what, I've got people saved in my phone, and a very good friend of mine, he's not going to mind me mentioning, his name's Timothy Musselwhite, right? And he's a great guy. And he is literally in my phone as Tim Muscle something, right? and it's muscle spelled as in muscles, but his name's actually muscle as in what you get in the sea as a seafood. So yeah, I have to change that at some point, right? So I do feel your pain.
He's in good company.
We totally kind of relate, and this is so true with so many people we've had on as guests. But I want to kind of, because you said that you got diagnosed when you got to Oxford University. Now you got in because you could talk and you got through the interview. Was that a relief for you when you finally realised that actually the reading and everything that you've gone through in the earlier days was not just due to you being a bit stupid when it came to reading? Was that a relief for you?
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. It was a light bulb moment. And very, for the self-esteem, realizing it's not that you're just stupid, but your brain has a physiological difference. It's incredibly important. And, of course, it was important functionally as well, because I went and got the support from the educational team at Oxford. But the most important difference it made was that it explained, it was like a crossword puzzle. It explained what had been going on all my life. And, I come across some people who say, we shouldn't identify and screen kids in school because you don't want to label them. But the thing is, if you're dyslexic, you label yourself. You label yourself as stupid. And instead, explaining that you have a condition, that your brain works differently, that can both allow you to get the support to learn how to read and write and also learn mitigations. But it's deeper than that. It's about understanding yourself. It's a bit like, if you diagnose somebody with a heart problem, not telling them because you don't want them to feel bad about the fact they're overweight. Well, why don't we tell them, and then they can do something about it? The problem is very similar. There are proven techniques for teaching primary school children who identify as strong on language, oral language, but weak on written. And these techniques need to be applied. But most importantly, we shouldn't be telling people that they're stupid.
And I totally agree with that. When I got diagnosed as being dyslexic, I was in my late 20s. I found it super, super empowering. And the best part about this was, right, I've been working now with Guy. So Guy actually also helps me on my journey. I've learned more about myself since working with Guy than I have known in the last 40 years of my life. And that is how powerful it is when you know what's going on. You then seek the support of the people around you and the things that you can create. I mean, some people that some of the most powerful people I have met have been dyslexic, and I've asked them, what does it mean to you? Like, to know that you're dyslexic, what does it actually mean? And they've all said it was empowering when I found out, because now I actually thought, okay, well, this is the situation. Now I know how to deal with it. I can take that step better because it's given me confidence. And I'm sure, I see you nodding your head, I'm sure you agree with that statement. It's
100%. And it's not, I think some people who find this stuff easy think that it might be disempowering, and you basically give up on your literacy capabilities. It's the opposite of the case. It empowers you to go and try to do something about it. And we all know that people who are dyslexic also, it's not just about reading and writing. It's about, it's about how your memory functions, in particular your short-term memory. And you can use other techniques like mind mapping that you can be taught. So there are, a combination of very structured approaches to learning how to read and write, which, by the way, work for non-dyslexic people as well, plus understanding some of the consequences. In my case, remembering my keys is something I have to actively think about, because it's often a common correlation that people basically you lose stuff. There's a correlation between how the mind works for that. So there is a broader problem to be solved, but you can only solve a problem if you name it.
I've got a question for you, and I'm going to have to ask it, and it's very uncontroversial, and I know that everyone's going to laugh at me, but you work in the building with the biggest, most famous clock in the world. My question to you is, can you tell the time on a clock face?
Yes, I can.
Well, I can't.
So oddly,
that's why I didn't understand why for so long.
Right.
I can't tell.
So I'm lucky in that my maths and my use of numbers is not a problem at all, and so I can tell the time from glancing at a clock in a normal way. There's a spectrum, isn't there? And everybody's neurodiversity is different.
The only reason I asked is because you work at Parliament, and I thought, I'm going to say that in years to come, I'm going to be able to say, I asked Matt Hancock if he could tell the time. And now I'm going to hand it over to Guy to save us.
It's an interesting thing, because as you say, Matt, everybody's kind of neurodiversity is different. And I was talking to someone yesterday who was initially diagnosed with dyspraxia as a child, then as a teenager had a diagnosis of depression, but that wasn't quite right. Then it was autism. Now they're looking at ADHD. So it is difficult. There's such a broad range of traits that the term neurodiversity encompasses, and they're all on a kind of scale of 1 to 10 anyway, and they interface differently, and there's good days and there's bad days. So it's massively complicated to pin it down, isn't it, as to what is behind any particular challenge, and which is why personal development and self-awareness is really important. And I think what really helps, thinking about your screening proposition, is that it gives people a chance to, as you say, to identify it, to start thinking, this isn't me. Because what I find is the people who I talk to who are really struggling have poor self-esteem, because the challenges that they face, they kind of embrace as them. And once you can isolate them and say, well, I am slow at reading, I am slow at writing and poor spelling, and maybe my planning and organization isn't very good, but these are all characteristics of dyslexia that I can apply strategies to. It's not me. I know I'm hardworking, diligent, person of integrity and resilience. Once you separate it out, then you can start really building, and that's when people thrive, isn't it? Because then they're kind of raised above that internal struggle. So I think it's good for the prospect for children to be able to have that opportunity to separate the mystery of why things aren't going well with the opportunity to pin it down to something, a condition.
Yeah, and then get the right interventions, right? So only 1 in 5 dyslexic children in school are identified. So screening everybody will help identify who needs support and who needs and who needs to get that extra support. And then you need to keep measuring to make sure that the kids who are identified as being dyslexic get that support to get their literacy up, which is going to be harder than those who find it naturally easy and straightforward. And it's about teacher training, because every teacher is a teacher of dyslexic children, because there are dyslexic children in all schools, and there are techniques that we know work, and that should be driven by the research and by the data. So I completely agree with the attitude that you describe, Guy. The key is not just the identification, it's the so what. What are we then going to do? If you identify a child as behind on their reading, especially when they're behind on the phonic end, as in the translation of symbols on a page into sounds in their ear, but they're good at use of language, potentially good at wide vocabulary that they picked up from oral language, then there's a gap, and that gap needs addressing. And so this can be solved. I'm an optimist, but it needs people to lean in and the education system to embrace the fact that every child is different and put in place the solutions that we know work, and to follow the science, so to speak, on how we can make that happen.
Absolutely, and I think the only way that's going to happen is if the momentum for change, isn't it, can be built and sustained, because it's a minority condition, isn't it? I used to be a support teacher for young people with visual impairment, and we would relentlessly ask schools if we could speak to all the staff to explain the impact of this when there was a new pupil attending. But the pressure that they had for training for all the other stuff they needed to know about, safeguarding and all the other children behavior and so on and so forth, as well as initiatives, meant that we were often kind of sidelined. And that's the difficulty, isn't it? Is keeping the profile, visible enough so that the impetus to spend, because it costs a fortune, doesn't it, to train all the teachers, and it takes time. But this is what we are hoping to achieve, isn't it, with this kind of conversation, and obviously with your bill and so on and so forth. Keep it in the public eye so that people understand, because lots of the people I talk to with dyslexia have never spoken to anybody about it before. So they don't know the characteristics.
Yeah, and another part of the campaign is about is for employers as well. There are, especially with modern technology, the downsides of employing somebody who's dyslexic are much smaller than they ever were, and the upsides are huge, because you want people who bring a creative and new angle to the workplace, and increasingly so, because jobs are increasingly about human interaction and creativity and lateral thinking, because the computers do the boring stuff these days.
Absolutely. So if people want to support or find out more, where can they go to do that? Is there a website?
Well, on my website, which is matthancock.com, and also there's a series of excellent charities in this space, like Made by Dyslexia, who are worth approaching, and who have resources. Then this is coming in front of Parliament, and it's obviously an important campaign with the Department for Education as well.
Fantastic.
One last question, Matt, before we end the show. Will you be attending, or will you be involved with the Dyslexia show coming up, run by Aaron Smith?
I hope so. I think the Dyslexia show. I mean, what a collection of people that's going to be.
Yeah, Yeah, brilliant. Well,
we'll hope to see you there.
Myself and Guy will be there as well. So let's stay in touch. And yeah, it would be brilliant to kind of be able to support you through this process, because I know from us as a company, we massively support it. Guy massively supports it. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show and talk about, you know, the importance of this. I genuinely, mate, I genuinely say this when it's been an absolute honor to have had you on the show and talk about a subject with someone who is in the position to be able to make such a significant difference to the lives of so many people. So well done, and thank you for the work that you're doing, and keep it up, mate. That's all.
Well, let's hope so. And thank you very much. Thanks for having me on. And I look forward to working on this. And let's all be on part of this movement to make sure that dyslexia is recognised, is spotted, and that all those who have dyslexia feel they have the support they need to go and make the most of their lives.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. It's been wonderful.
So from all of us, you take care. Have a lovely day. Thank you so much.